Good afternoon, YouTube. Welcome back to my channel, JPM.Cuisine. So today we're going to be talking about, these are both Mercer Culinary 8-inch chef's knife. These are from the Genesis series, but one is the full bolster and one is what they call the short bolster or no bolster. Okay, so exact same knife, exact same steel, but very different in terms of the profile because of one having a bolster versus one not having a bolster. This is a very, or it can be a very heated topic in some of the discussions on the forums about the utility of a bolster or even the hindrance of a bolster. I've seen comments where, you know, bolsters are for new chefs or new people that are new to cooking, and I've seen that, you know, bolsters are a hindrance or an issue when cutting. And yes, in some sense, a bad bolster is a hindrance. These, however, are good bolsters, okay? And what you'll notice when you're using these for actually preparing food or for cutting vegetables and fruits and things of that nature to prepare food, that they have very different, very unique feels within your hands and utility in that sense. Now, for me, the majority of the time when I've been cooking and utilizing knives, in my experience, I haven't used a lot of the knives that have had bolsters, but I have grown to appreciate the bolster from the ergonomic standpoint, from the comfort sake. A bolster provides a very good protection between the choil of the knife and a hot spot that will usually incur on your middle finger from doing a pinch grip. So if you use a pinch grip like I do, and like the majority of the people do, what you're going to notice is that this bolster provides great protection and a great cover from your finger developing a hot spot against the choil that this one doesn't provide. And for some of the knives that they make, the choils tend to be very sharp and unpolished, and you tend to feel a lot of heat, and you end up getting a callus on your finger from utilizing a knife that doesn't have a bolster. The downside to the bolster, goodbye bug. The downside to the bolster is that it can get in the way of the chopping, or it can get in the way of the sharpening and honing. Typically the sharpening. Now, if you notice this bolster, and I don't know if you can see that very well, but the bolster is recessed by a fraction. So what that means is when you cut down, move this out of the way for now. When I cut down, the bolster isn't impeding upon my ability to cut. In fact, the bolster is recessed and angled off a bit that you're able to get a flush lockup with the heel of the knife and the board. That's excellent. A crappy bolster is going to protrude and you're going to hit the bolster before you can hit the end of the knife, that heel. So you're not gonna get a very good chop. Same thing when you're trying to rock chop, you're just gonna constantly feel that. So yes, if the bolster is crappy, then the bolster is gonna get in the way of your ability to utilize the knife. But if you're cooking and you're prepping for 8 hours, sometimes this bolster is going to be a godsend. It's going to be, you know, just what you need in order to reduce the calluses and the buildup of pain that you may end up getting on your fingers from extended use, which not everybody has experience with that. The majority of my experience now comes from preparation for gatherings and especially for Thanksgiving, in which, you know, I'm prepping for at least 2 or 3 days straight. A lot of pre-prep of chopping vegetables for a lot of the dishes I'm going to prepare. I do the entire, all the cooking in the house I do, and especially for Thanksgiving, it's basically a one-man show, and I'm the one who's prepping all the dishes for the Thanksgiving that I host. So having a bolster in that sense is quite the comfort. the welcomed feature on a knife that I've come to appreciate, especially after years and years of chopping without one, where, you know, your fingers are just, by the time you go to bed, they're just so raw and painful. Now, the other thing that I've noticed recently though is that the development of the knives without the bolsters, that they've done a really good job in terms of polishing, and sometimes it's recessed enough that even when you do your chop, or when you do your pinch grip rather, you don't come into contact that much with the choil. In this sense, both of these knives are a win-win. The Mercer Culinary line of knives, you know, if you don't know this, if you go to their website, you'll read, but they supply like, I think it's 90% of the culinary institutions in the United States with knives. And I know that you can go online to Amazon and you can get student kits that have several pieces in their sets, and I think the majority of them are going to be the Genesis sets, or they might be the Renaissance, but I really think they're the Genesis because of the Santoprene, and it makes sense. These knives are amazing. They have perfect weight, perfect balance. I really enjoy these knives a lot. I've really started to utilize the Mercer line in my house a lot more predominantly than a lot of the other knives that I've picked up over the past year. So let's talk about some specs here. So we've got the Bolster Renaissance, or the Bolster Genesis, 8-inch. We've got 243 grams, and the short bolster is 221. So we've got about 22 grams of variance between these two knives. And you might notice that after 8 hours of prepping, this noticeably feels heavier. It still feels balanced right by the choil, or right by the bolster. Let's see. Yeah, right there. It still feels balanced right on that bolster. The same for this, is it's just in front of the bolster that you're going to get the balance on this. Let me move that out. So almost the identical same spot, and that's what you know. That's the phenomenal thing about these knives, guys, especially with Mercer, is that they really pay attention. These are not, you know, some of the knives that we see on the market that just come out, like the $20 knives, or, you know, some of the new knives that are hitting the market. These are well thought. This is a company that I stand behind, that I think, you know, is doing a great job, and they're offering tools for students that are wanting to enter into the culinary institutes. And I think these are still fantastic tools for home cooks alike, because of the quality and the feel that you're going to get from these. They are, you know, some of the best value knives that I've seen on the market. The Millennia series was my top value knife of 2017, and the Genesis paring knife was the value paring knife that you're getting on the market today. They use the X50 CRMO V15s, very high quality German steel, or ThyssenKrupp style steel, very common, and they do it right. Again, I used to, you know, say that the Santoprene handles weren't for me, but no, not anymore. These things are really comfortable, and as I continue to cook for longer extended periods of time, I grow to appreciate the grip and the feel of these handles in my hands. Fit and finish, yeah, you know, you can tell that there's some, they're not completely seamless when it comes to the handle to the metal, but I don't think that's without purpose. I think Mercer is a company that knows exactly what they're doing when they're designing knives, and they're designing them with these thoughts in mind. So let's cut an apple. I'm gonna eat this apple anyway, so I'm not gonna butcher it, but you know, when you're doing a chop, just know, even if it's a push chop, I'm not having any contact with that bolster. Now, one thing to note when you're cutting with a bolster, if you have one that protrudes, you're going to contact that all day long, and it's not going to give you a clean cut, and you're not going to get clean pieces like this, okay? They're going to be stuck, okay? that is going to happen, and you can adjust for that by basically taking the bolster off of the edge of the block and cutting sort of off the block. You'll get that down, so you can still do it. It's just when they think about that in the way that they built this knife, that's not going to be an issue. What you will run into though is after several sharpenings, excuse me. What you will run into though is after several sharpenings, this bolster will eventually protrude beyond the edge of the knife. So in that regard, you know, it probably is easier to manufacture it in this manner, but I think knife manufacturers who think about this might be able to shorten the bolster to just maybe, you know, giving you a half an inch or a third of an inch away from the edge, and you still get the benefit of the bolster near the choil. It's just that you're getting a little bit more surface to work with. That would alleviate the issue with the concern of sharpening and then having to grind down the bolster to match, because grinding down the bolster is not something I want to do. Okay, the majority of us aren't going to have a wheel to grind that down. Now that being said, the short bolster, you know, you lose 20 grams, which might be a benefit in the long run, but it just doesn't have that same sort of feel as the bolster. I really grown accustomed to the feel of the bolster. Yeah, you still get the same chops. You know, it still works exactly the same as the one with bolster. You get the same push cuts, the same chops with it. The lockup on it is the same, but again, the concern for me is potentially the hot spot that you may develop from your technique in using this knife, which may call for a bolster. So those are sort of the pros and cons of the bolster. I don't think that in any way, shape, or form it makes this one the better knife than this one, or this one the better knife than this. I mean, in this sense, you can see they're identical in terms of the metal composition. However, you can tell, you know, very distinctly when you use these knives the difference between a bolster and not having a bolster. I would say for anybody who is on the fence or not sure about whether or not they like a bolster, Mercer is a company that provides these knives at a low enough price that you could potentially pick up one of both or one of each and give it a go and see which one suits you better. For me, I'm gonna stick with the knife with the bolster just because I enjoy the way it feels. However, I know I can use these just as easily and get the exact same feel and the same exact performance out of both of them. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this series on the bolster versus the short bolster. I hope you found this video entertaining. I'd love to hear your thoughts or concerns or any feedback you have on the video itself or on these two knives, whether or not you prefer the bolster or not, and you know, maybe some points to support either way. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next.
Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune,
or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing in them, to die.